Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com and I'm here today with a model showcase video for this 1/25th scale British Chieftain main battle tank. Unlike my other smaller scale build videos, in which those models are built for commission and belong to a private collector, this model that you see here is for myself and is going into my personal collection. I do take on commission builds, from models ranging from 1/35th scale all the way up to 1/6 scale. As for availability and pricing information, that information would be best by contacting me direct through the EastCoastArmory.com website, which with the email address info@EastCoastArmory.com. First, a quick walk around the model. The model itself started off as a 1/25th scale plastic Chieftain Mark II kit from Toy Star. The Toy Star kit itself is a knockoff of the original Tamiya 1/25th scale plastic kit. The model itself was purchased back in the year 2000 from a South Korean online hobby shop. Fortunately, since then, the website appears to have been taken down, which is regrettable as that vendor was a great source to find really hard to find South Korean made model kits. In addition to the Chieftain, Toy Star also produced a few other model kits, all of which were based on the original Tamiya tooling. Some other kits most noteworthy are the 1/25th scale SU-100 as well as the T-3485. At the time the kit was purchased, the Tamiya versions were out of production, and because of which were considered to be collector's items and were very expensive. The Toy Star versions here offered an economical alternative to the original vintage Tamiya kits. Back when I purchased the model, I paid roughly about $30 for the original kit, which was a fraction of what the original Tamiya kits were going for at the time. In addition to Toy Star, this kit was also released from the Canadian manufacturer Modelcraft. Within the last few years, Tamiya has re-released all of their 1/25th scale model series, their Chieftain and T-34s included. With their Chieftain, they went ahead and made a couple modifications to the original tooling, replacing some of the plastic suspension pieces with that of metal parts. Also, with their Chieftain, they went ahead and released it in two separate versions. The first version is a complete re-release of the original tank with wire remote control. The second version is fully radio controlled with that of turret functions including turret rotation and gun elevation. As for the original Toy Star kit, like I mentioned before, it is a complete knockoff of the original Tamiya, not only with the kit but also with the box art. The vehicle on the box art itself is directly copied from the original Tamiya box art, with the only difference is that the scene is slightly different. With the original Tamiya box art, there are two British soldiers in this corner over here, but looking at a map with their FNFALs. As for the kit inside, it too is also heavily copied from the original Tamiya. As we can see here, I have one of the runners that came with the kit that was used for the construction. And it has the Tamiya style plastic with Tamiya style layout. Even has little the identification tag, which on the Tamiya kit would have the company logo as well as the runner ID number. As you can see, the ID lettering as well as the company info has been milled away, yet the tag still remains. This is also true on the other portions of the model in which the Tamiya logo would have been present. This is also true for the tank's instructions. The tank's instructions appear to be very Tamiya-esque. However, have little quirks in them, like having the person that tells you to follow the instructions, and he's represented by the Russian caricature, which is found on Tamiya's Russian tank series. As for the quality of the model itself, the model does have basically the same type of quality which is found on the original Tamiya kit. Now keep in mind, if anyone's interested in purchasing one of these 1/25th scale tanks, is that the tooling that was used to create these models dates back to the 1970s, because of which the molding and detailing that we have here is going to be considered a lot more basic and possibly even rougher compared to what model builders are used to with modern contemporary kits of today. The 1/25th scale itself is somewhat of an interesting odd in-between scale. It's smaller than 1/16 but larger than 1/35. These kits were the scale was actually very common back in the 1970s, and both companies such as Bandai as well as Tamiya did offer a somewhat wide range of vehicles in the selection here. The two most prolific Tamiya offerings in this scale are the Centurion with the full interior, as well as their early production Tiger 1, which too has some rudimentary interior detailing. The other vehicles, such as the Panther and Jag Panther, have been offered by Academy for the last 20 some odd years and are also very prolific to find on the market. After the 1970s, there haven't been a whole lot of vehicles released in this scale. And with the popularity of 1/16, the 1/25th scale vehicles, the whole scale range kind of fell by the wayside in terms of armor modelers. With the somewhat larger scale than 1/35, they are a little bit more of hands-on type model, and with the simplistic detailing that's found on them, does leave a little bit of elbow room for modifications as well as scratch build details. As for the vehicle that you see here, this model here is built mostly out of the box. However, I did modify and improve a few key areas on the build, which really does help with the look. We'll be going over these mods in this video. Like I mentioned before, the model itself started off being purchased in the year 2000, and in 2001 I actually started building it. I built approximately about 25% of the model until I encountered a serious issue, and that issue being that I did not have enough track links to assemble enough track for both sides of the vehicle. Obviously, with the serious issue, I wasn't able to work on the model until I was able to acquire some more track links. At first I tried contacting the company as well as the vendor. However, when both of those resources failed to yield any results, I went ahead and put the model back in the box and put it on a shelf in the back of the shop and save it for a rainy day. The model sat in that location for approximately 12 to 13 years, and about a month or two ago I decided to take the model out of the dustbin and go ahead and get it finished. The reason why I was able to complete the model now was, as opposed to back then, was over the last several years I went ahead and learned techniques on making molds as well as resin castings. In addition to making molds, due to some of the experimentation I've been doing on 1/6 scale tanks, I've also been playing around with flexible resins. The flexible resin that I use very closely matches the type of rubbery vinyl that's used on the original track links that are found on the kit. Once I was able to make a mold of the original link, I went ahead and used this flexible resin in order to cast the tracks, thus completing the set that we see here. With the track issue resolved, I was able to build the model until completion. Now, as of note, the 1/25th scale Tamiya Chieftains have a very unique feature on them that was actually pretty ahead of its time. Like I mentioned before, the track links themselves are a flexible vinyl type material that's the same exact material which is found on the Tamiya 1/25th scale Centurion. They also assemble in the exact same manner. However, unlike the Centurion, which tracks are made which are represented to be all metal, on the Chieftain they have rubber pads on them. Now, what's unique about the Tamiya Chieftain is that the rubber pad and the track link itself are actually comprised of two separate pieces. The pads are small little rubber inserts that get glued and soldering iron pinned to the vinyl track links that you see here. This is actually a very nice feature and is very realistic of the actual tank itself. It's also the type of feature that you would see on more modern contemporary kits of today. As for a modeling aspect, because the two pieces are separate, it makes painting and weathering of the track a lot more easier in that you can paint and weather the metal and rubber components separately. Moving our way to the model suspension, just like with the rest of the 1/25th scale vehicles that were released back in the 70s, they feature, in addition to the workable track links, a functional suspension. Now, the suspension itself is not like a spring-type suspension in which, you could, like on the 1/16 tanks, where you could push down on it and the tank will bounce back up. The suspension on this vehicle here is a form-fitting suspension, which means the suspension will articulate when placed over uneven terrain. Now, on the new Tamiya re-releases, the swing arms on this model here are actually made out of metal, while on this Korean copy, they are made out of plastic. Just like with their Centurion, the side skirts are also removable. They snap onto the vehicle in these three locations here and pop off if desired. With the side skirts off, you can also see the type of detailing that is found on the suspension itself. Just like with their Centurion, the swing arms that are found on the Chieftain kit do have functional shock absorbers on the first two and last two suspension arms. Moving our way to the model Sprocket. Sprocket itself is all plastic, and I'm not sure about the original Tamiya kits. However, on the Toy Star version, I had a small little issue with the sprocket that needed to be fixed. If you glue the sprockets together on this version here, the timing of the teeth will not properly line up. The two sprockets, once glued, the teeth will have a meshing that you see here, because of which the track will not mesh properly with the timing on the teeth. To fix this, I went ahead and carefully cut the sprockets and manually adjusted the timing so that rather than the sprocket teeth being opposed to each other, they lined up perfectly, which helps the track properly mesh with the teeth that we see here. Moving our way to the front of the vehicle leads us to a feature which is unique to the Tamiya 1/25th scale Chieftains, and that is of the front Applicant armor that we have mounted to the nose. Even though the kit says that the tank is representing that of a Chieftain Mark II, from doing a little bit of research on the internet, I found that the vehicle that it appears that Tamiya was actually modeling was that of the Chieftain prototype G1. When the Chieftain was being developed, several pilot models were created and had the G1 designation. I believe it was about 6 or so. Of which, I believe only one I have seen that still has this front Applicant armor system that we see here. The Chieftain itself has an all-cast rounded hull that's similar of an American M60 or M48 pattern. This boxed front end that we see here is actually bolted to the vehicle's hull via row of fasteners on the lower portion and top portion here on the hull. If anyone is interested in purchasing one of these kits to try to turn it into one of the later versions of the Chieftain, they're going to have to work around this nose section here and possibly have to do an extensive amount of body work in order to correct and remove the box-shaped Applicant armor appearance that we have here. As for the model here, the row of fasteners that we have here on the bottom are not found on the kit and are added by myself via wire brads. The little footrest here is present with the kit, as well as another unique feature on the Tamiya 125 Chieftain is that of the headlights and periscopes are actually made out of clear plastic inserts, which is again a nice touch. Moving our way to the rear portion of the vehicle, start here with the rear plate. The rear plate on the original model has a huge hole in this portion here, and this is for the wire for the two-way wire remote to emerge from the rear portion of the vehicle. This hole hurts the look of the model, and to repair it, what I did was I went ahead and cut a styrene piece of plastic, the exact same dimensions as the plate here, and simply glued it over the original kit. That styrene plate was then flared in with the bodywork to the seamless appearance that you see here. With the hole removed, the look of the vehicle is also improved. Moving along to the engine deck, all of the engine deck fittings that you see here are built out of the box. The only quick addition that was added was that of the weld beads on the support frame itself. In addition to adding the welds to the support frame, welds were also added to the rear portion here on where the two plates meet each other on the rear portion of the vehicle. In addition to adding the welds, photo etch mesh was also added to this box over here. This component does have meshwork that's molded into the component, and that meshwork was simply swapped out with that of some photo etch mesh. The addition of the photo etch mesh does help the look of the vehicle. Also, as of note, for British tanks, all post-World War II British tanks seem to have this feature. This is true on the Centurion, the Chieftain, and I believe the Challenger as well. On the rear portion of the engine deck, there is a framed up portion. Along the top portion of the frames are rubber bump stops. The rubber bump stops that you see here on the kit are the original kit supply ones and were more than adequate at the job at hand. When building British tank models, it's a nice tip to go ahead and paint the bump stops and weather them slightly different from that of the rest of the vehicle. Moving our way to the model's turret, starting with the rear portion of the turret, as we can see here, the small little basket that is kit supplied was modified in having some more photo etch mesh added to the basket itself. The mesh was added to the sides as well as the under portion here of the basket. Simple addition also gives the vehicle a little bit more of a pop. Moving along to the tank's searchlight. The most prominent feature on the Chieftain turret is that of the side-mounted searchlight. Now, the searchlight on this version here is another component which is typical for that of the prototype G1. Later versions of the Chieftain, like the Mark V and so on, featured a different design of a cover plate. On the G1, the searchlight was shrouded by two doors that opened towards the center, while on the later versions, it was facilitated by a single door which opened up. Now, the kit does supply you with all the components to fabricate the searchlight, and is actually pretty nice for the tooling at hand. The only addition I made to the searchlight was the addition of small little metal handles on the doors, on the rear portion, as well as I also fabricated the interior searchlight detailing that's found on the interior portion of the shroud. As for the type of detailing that went into the searchlight actually has its canister, which is mounted inside of the shroud. And in addition to the canister, also is topped off with that of a clear lens. The lens that we see here is actually a spare lens from my 1/6 scale clear resin US AFV headlight and searchlight kits. The searchlight itself is another nice addition that is important to the model and does give it a nice detailed appearance. Moving along from the searchlight, another quick addition of detailing to add is that of the power cable for that of the smoke trajector. Cable itself is nothing more than a simple electric wire that is drilled into the housing of the launcher and that of the turret. This detailing is present on both sides of the vehicle. Moving our way to the front portion of the turret takes us to the Coaxial Machinegun. This bit of detailing is absent on the kit original, on both the South Korean copy as well as the Tamiya kit original. The version that you see here is fabricated out of resin that was cut and sculpted into shape, and the machine gun barrel itself is nothing more than a simple wire brad. This is another important bit of detailing that does help with the look. Progressing to the tank's gun barrel, the barrel that you see here is the kit original, however does have a few modifications to it. The first notable modification is that of the thermal sleeve that we have on the front and rear portion of the barrel. The thermal sleeve itself is missing on the kit original. In fact, the kit original is again based on the G1 prototype in the Bovington Museum, which is absent of this component. The thermal sleeve itself is a very prominent feature found on British tanks from the 1950s all the way up until today. The thermal sleeve that you see here on this barrel is actually made out of real cloth. It's cotton, it's small weave cotton that was dyed to the color that we see here, and the bands were also fabricated and added. While removing the seam, this portion here of the barrel had to have been replaced. The halves don't exactly line up perfectly, and if we notice on this portion here of the barrel, there are several rings. Those rings were very, very difficult to work around with that of the seam removal. So much so that the original piece was unsalvageable and was amputated from the kit. To replace it, a new resin version was turned on the lathe and then added to the bore evacuator. In addition in order to mount that to the original barrel, the entire barrel itself was filled with resin, thus giving it a lot more sturdy and a lot more of a solid component to mount the new pieces to. One thing as of note on the Tamiya Chieftains is that I'm actually surprised at how stiff the gun is. Typically on these older models, and even on contemporary models of the day, when you have a long gun barrel like you do on this model here, the points on the trunnion tend to be a little bit loose, and because of that, the barrel will seem to droop. So much so that on my typical builds, I usually have to put some kind of a counterbalance spring on the inside of the turret. However, as we can see from this model here, that it's not necessary, as the barrel is perfectly stiff and will not droop no matter where I position the barrel. Another quick mod that I made to the turret that I highly recommend is adding that of turret locks. The original kit, the turret simply sits into the turret ring and it doesn't have any locks or anything preventing it from popping off. On my model, I always like to have turret locks on my turrets, so I went ahead and fabricated 2 plastic locks on the underside of the turret neck and 2 corresponding keys on unseen areas of the upper hull. The locks are very effective and simple in keeping the tank's turret firmly in place where it should belong. Moving our way to the tank's copula and turret-mounted machine gun. The copula itself is all assembled as per the kit. As you can see from the scene, all the periscope detailing is added. The periscopes themselves, like I mentioned before, are clear plastic inserts that are supplied with the kit, and also, if we could see, have their windshield wipers molded in, which is a very nice touch. The hatch is fully operational, as are all of the hatches on the vehicle. However, the detailing on the hatches is, as one might imagine, would be very basic and simplistic in detailing, and there is no interior detailing of the model, unlike their Centurion and Tiger 1. As for the Commander's anti-aircraft machine gun, the kit has what replicates that of a M1919. Now, as of note, the British Army still used the Browning M1919 up until the 1950s and into the 1960s, to which the gun was replaced by the GPMG, or what's known as the FN Mag. The 1919 is present on the Chieftain G1 prototype pilot model that is found in the Bonnington Tank Museum. As for the gun itself, it's very basic in detailing in terms of the kit. The one modification that I did make to it was I dremelled out the barrel cooling vents, which were very faintly molded into the original kit. Also, as a quick bit of detailing that was added, the small yellow ID letterings were added to the ammunition can that we see here. With the detailing out of the way, let's go into the tank's functions. As we can see from the original instruction manual, the tank is remote controlled. Now, remote control is not radio controlled. The difference being that radio control utilizes a radio transmitter and wirelessly controls the model. Remote control, on the other hand, utilizes a corded wire that leads to a control box, and then you control the model remotely via the wire. Older model kits of the era from the 1970s and the 1980s featured this type of a layout. The remote control that you see here is the kit original. It is based off of the Tamiya 4C battery remote. Even has the place where the Tamiya logo used to be. Instead, they have their own company branding in place. You have what would appear to be 2 speeds forward, 2 speeds in reverse, and a neutral. However, from my experience with these units, and this includes the Tamiya one as well, it's just 1 speed forward and 1 speed back. Now, one modification that I made was that of the remote. As we recall from earlier in the video, the wire that controls the gearbox is supposed to emerge from the rear portion of the vehicle. However, since that is unsightly and I don't want to have a wire dangling out of the back of my tank all the time, I went ahead and made the remote disconnect via this microphone plug over here. In order to connect the vehicle, I had to implement a couple little features that I'll go over now. To hook up the tank for operation, you need to put the model on its side. As we can see here on the bottom of the vehicle, we have an axis panel. This axis panel is an addition made by myself. It is made out of soldered sheet metal and is held to the vehicle via magnets. In the past, whenever I used to build these when I was younger, I would have to use fasteners in order to mount it to the hull. Magnets, however, are a lot more efficient and are a lot more easy in that you don't have bolts to deal with, nor do you have any pieces to lose. The piece simply pops off, and inside here is my jack. The jack gets emerged from the under portion of the model. Now, another common problem with tanks with wire remotes is that the wire that's dangling out of either the underbelly of the vehicle or even the rear of the vehicle can sometimes get caught up in the tank's tracks if you're driving the model or making a turn. Obviously, that's less than ideal. Now, in the past, you had, on some of the older Tamiya kits, you might have a small little clip protruding out of the underbelly of the model. The clip is unsightly and hurts the look of it. Rather than having the clip in place, I went ahead and again utilized 2 captive magnets to lock onto the tank's hull. In addition to the magnets that are found on the interior portion here of the rim for the axis plate, I have 2 powerful magnets located on the center spine that's directly underneath the gearbox. When it's time to run the vehicle, I take the wire and click it to the bottom of the hull. The magnets will find each other, and if we notice, are very stiff and the wire will not run around and easily get snagged by the tracks while the tank is in operation. Once the wire is connected to the vehicle, as you can see, the wire now emerges from the rear portion of the tank. I can then take my control cable, connect it together, and the vehicle is now ready for operation. Now, a couple of my viewers might wonder why I went ahead and did this route instead of making the tank radio control, or if you can make the tank radio control. Technically, you can. The tank does have a dual motor gearbox, which is definitely capable of making the tank radio control. You can make any tank radio control if it has a dual motor gearbox. The reason why I didn't make the tank radio control is, for one, for cost reasons. I didn't feel like putting a lot of money into this build to get this tank fully radio control, and also because the tank's gearbox as well as the tracks are really not that durable for radio control use. For motorization use, the tank probably works best. However, for radio control, not so much. Now, keep in mind that's also because this is the South Korean copy. I believe the Tamiya, the original Tamiya version, does have a much better suspension as well as a much better material for the tracks, which are more durable and better for radio control. And on top of that, if I was to recommend this kit for radio control, this Chieftain, I would recommend just saving the extra pennies and going directly for the Tamiya radio control unit. The Tamiya model has everything you need out of the box, including not only the running, but also functions as well, namely turret rotation and gun elevation. Since the model is all hooked up, let's go ahead and take it to my test track to put a couple miles on it. Well, I have the tank all hooked up. Let's try to put some miles on the tracks. And that concludes this model showcase video for this 1/25th scale British Chieftain main battle tank. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook. And don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for 1/6 scale builds, as well as 1/6 scale and 1/16 scale detailed components. Thank you.